Levinson, and welcome to Light On, Light Through, episode 79. Patrick Rands interviews me about my music. Well, it's now the end of September 2010, and in just 2 months in November 2010, Whiplash Records in the UK, also known as Sound of Salvation Records, will be reissuing my 1972 album, Twice Upon a Rhyme. It'll be reissued in a vinyl repressing. I've seen an advanced copy. It has all the trimmings. It looks great. There's a long history to Twice Upon a Rhyme, which, as I mentioned, was first released in 1972. That was by Happy Sad Records, my own record company, as a matter of fact. And lots of things have happened over the years, and some of the songs from Twice Upon a Rhyme will no doubt sound familiar to you because I've used bits and pieces of them right here in the Light On, Light Through podcast. In fact, the music you just heard at the beginning, the so-called bumper music, as we call it in podcast world, that comes from one of the cuts of Twice Upon a Rhyme. And in December 2008, a South Korean record company, Big Pink Records, also known as Beatball, I don't know why these companies always have more than one name, but they issued a really fine-looking and fine-sounding mini CD of Twice Upon a Rhyme, along with 3 bonus cuts. Twice Upon a Rhyme was reviewed, I guess, back in 2002 in a Japanese magazine, Record Collectors Magazine. The songs have been played here and there on the web. And in June 2006, I drove up to Boston for one of the best interviews I ever did. I didn't conduct the interview, I was the subject of the interview. It was conducted by Patrick Rands, and it was broadcast on WZBC Radio. That's the radio station out of Boston College. Beautiful college in the suburbs of Boston. And since then, that interview has been bouncing around here and there on the web. I thought I'd put it up in its entirety. It's a little over an hour, and lots of goodies in this interview. I tell how I first met the late Ellie Greenwich. She wasn't late in 2006. I'm sorry to say she is now. But I first met her in Central Park, singing with Stu Niddickman and Ira Margolis. Our group then was called The New Outlook. And Ellie and Mike Rashkow then signed us to Atlantic Records. I talk about the real reason that Boris Midney, who played saxophone, clarinet, and drums on some of the cuts on Twice Upon a Rhyme, the real reason that he left the Soviet Union back in the 1960s. Boris, by the way, has gone on to have a great career as a disco producer. Lots of other good stuff in this interview as well. But rather than my describing it, why don't I put the interview on right now? As I said, it's a little over an hour. Hope you enjoy it. There will be show notes for the interview that I'm posting on Light On, Light Through. That's LIGHTON, LIGHTTHROUGH.com. A complete list of the songs in this interview that are played in their entirety, as well as links to other places on the web where you can hear more about my music. So sit back, enjoy, and I'll be back after the interview with a couple of final words.
Welcome to another edition of WZBC's Test Pattern, the weekly show here at WZBC where we spotlight an artist, a genre, or a label. Tonight we will be featuring the music of Paul Levinson in his many different guises. recorded in the 1960s and early 70s. And we have Paul Levinson in the studio with us tonight. So we'll be interviewing him, and he'll be playing us a brand new song. So stay tuned for that. We're going to start off here with Paul Levinson's band, The Other Voices, with a recording called No Olympian Heights from 1968 here on WZBC. If you have any questions or comments, the phone number is 617-552-4686. Here we go with No Olympian Heights on WZBC. The Other Voices here on WZBC featuring Paul Levinson. We've got Paul Levinson in the studio today with us. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing great, Patrick. How about you?
I'm doing great, too. I'm glad you could come down here and join us.
Well, listen, it's my pleasure, and it's great to hear those old songs. Stu Nidickman, Ira Margolis, and I, we were originally called The New Outlook. The reason why I mentioned that's a name that I came up with, so I'm especially fond of it. But one day we were singing in Central Park. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Actually, a lot of beautiful things happen on Sunday afternoons. For example, Georges Méliès discovered the principle of film editing on a beautiful afternoon in Paris in the 1890s. But this was a beautiful Sunday afternoon in New York in the late 1960s, and Stu, Ira, and I were singing some of our songs, not No Olympian Height or Hung Up on Love. We were singing some of the folk rock material that we had been writing and was singing. And a couple walked up to us, good-looking couple, good-looking guy, good-looking woman, and they were Mike Rashkow and Ellie Greenwich.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And, at first, we didn't have a hat out or anything, so, we weren't sure if they were going to give us a quarter or something, and we didn't recognize them because we didn't really know what they looked like. But we started talking, and what came out of that is Ellie and Mike signed us to their production company, and the two cuts that we just heard, No Olympian Height and Hung Up on Love, actually were the A and B side of our second single that was released on Atlantic Records. The first single was a song called May My Heart Be Cast Into Stone, which also had Hung Up on Love as the B side.
Okay.
And I actually wrote Hung Up on Love with Mikie Harris, who in those days was married to Mike Rashkow.
Okay, we'll be featuring a song with her singing a little later.
That's right.
So that's cool.
It's one of my favorite songs, Love Colored Glasses. What's interesting about No Olympian Height, I mean, your listeners might like to know, it was written by Brute Force, who actually, in the early 60s, was a singer and writer with the Tokens, the fabulous group.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That did The Lion Sleeps Tonight. And but by the mid-60s, he sort of branched out on his own, and he wrote No Olympian Height, and as soon as we heard it, we thought it was, really great.
Yeah, it has great lyrics.
It's spectacular.
Playful lyrics in there.
Yeah.
It's great.
No Olympian Height, No Majesty. What's interesting is the song is entitled No Olympian Height without the S, but I guess someone at Atlantic Records, their fingers slipped when they were setting the label, so they put an S on it.
Oh, okay.
Works. I think it works okay either way.
Okay, so we're going to hear another song coming up here including Ellie Greenwich, called the Definitive Rock Chorale. Can you tell me a little story about them?
Yeah, well, the Definitive Rock Chorale was really an early supergroup. And so it consisted of Ellie Greenwich, Tony Wine, Ron Dante, who also was the voice for the Archies, and the voice for a group called Gallery, and the voice for a group called the Cufflinks. He has a great voice, and he's still actually singing. But Mike Rashkow and Ellie Greenwich went into the studio and got together a bunch of the greatest singers around. Steve Tutinger was another one. And they recorded a couple of songs, and one of them was a song that I had just written called Picture Postcard World. And it was released on Decca Records, and no one ever heard of it since, until this very minute.
Well, actually, it was reissued on a compilation on Radioactive Records this year called Utopia Daydream, New Rebel Volume 4. So if you like what you hear, you can actually pick up this next song on a compilation CD. So,
must be hot if it's Radioactive Records.
So here we go with the Definitive Rock Chorale with Picture Postcard World, written by Paul Levinson here on WZBC. If you have any questions or comments, the phone number here is 617-552-4686. And you can go online at wzbc.org. Okay, here we go with Picture Postcard World.
Two people lounging in an air-conditioned room filled with push-button perfume and plastic petals, all waiting for bloom. true. You brought me sunshine, sweet wine, so fine, baby, you're mine. Unbelievable, inconceivable, unbelievable, inconceivable. Flying yesterday, flying high today. Ooh, with you here, no fear, no tears, skies are gonna be clear. Once upon a time, the cloak of night hung over me. Then I heard it chime, a stroke of light shone suddenly. Unbelievable, inconceivable, unbelievable, inconceivable. Warm as summer rain, sweet as candy cane too. You make my world bright, so bright, every morning and night. Unbelievable, inconceivable, unbelievable, inconceivable. Warm as summer rain, sweet as candy cane too. You make my world bright, so right, every morning and night. Unbelievable, inconceivable,
You're listening to 90.3 WZBC, and we just heard an unreleased song by the Vogues, Unbelievable, Inconceivable You, which was written by Paul Levinson, who we have here in the studio tonight. And I'm curious, Paul, what's the story behind that last song we just played?
Well, the Vogues were always one of my favorite groups. I thought You Are the One. I still think You Are the One. You're the one that I'm dreaming of. I always loved that song. And 5 O'Clock World was a pretty good song, too. But I actually, when I wrote Unbelievable, I had no idea who would sing it. And in fact, what happened is before the New Outlook was signed by Mike Rashkow and Ellie Greenwich, we were signed to Bobby Darin's publishing company, TM Music, and a guy by the name of Erwin Schuster, one of the great impresarios of rock publishing. He passed away a few years ago, unfortunately. Were interested in the songs that Stu Nidickman and I were writing. Anyway, we left TM Music, went with Mike and Ellie, but we still had a relationship with Erwin Schuster. So one day I wrote this song, Unbelievable, Inconceivable You, and I ran into Erwin Schuster in the street, actually on the corner of the Brill Building. He said, "What's doing?" I said, "Well, I just wrote a new song." He said, "Come upstairs, play it for me." I did. He liked it. He got it out to the Vogues. So far, things were really going great. The next thing, he told me the Vogues were definitely going to record it, and it was going to be recorded on a new session they were doing for a new label. I think they were originally on a company called CeCo Records or CC Records, I forget the exact name, but they had just left that company to go with Reprise Records, which was a division of Warner Brothers, a huge company. So they recorded that version that you just heard, but then some genius there got the idea, well, maybe we should make them sound less rock and roll, more like the Letterman. And so they went back into the studio, did Turn Around, Look at Me, and that was released as a single. It was a huge hit. It was a great job. I mean, the group sounds great on it, but they went off in that more sort of pop standard direction. And so Unbelievable languished in the backwaters of sound until this minute.
That's amazing. Well, hopefully they'll put out some kind of Vogues box set or reissue, and maybe it'll show up on that.
Yeah, well, I was talking about Unbelievable on Spectropop 2 or 3 years ago, and a lot of Vogue fans wrote to me, and I sent them copies of the MP3, and they enjoyed it. And, the Vogue sound really great there. The falsetto, the lead, it's classic. You Are the One.
Yeah.
5 O'Clock World Vogues.
All right, so up next we'll be featuring Donna Marie singing Sunshine Mind. And now Donna was a singer with the Archies, I hear?
Donna was a singer with the Archies, and she and Ronnie Dante used to go on tour together because, of course, the Archies were a cartoon group, so you couldn't exactly have a cartoon character on tour. But they were the voices. And Donna Marie went off on her own while she was still with the Archies, doing songs under her own name. And this song, Sunshine Mine, was recorded by Jimmy Whiz Wisner. He produced it, actually. Donna Marie recorded it, and it was released on Columbia Records in the late 1960s.
That's amazing.
I wrote this on the piano in my then girlfriend's house, Tina Vazic, and the piano was so good, and I liked her so much that we got married.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll hear Donna Marie singing Paul Levinson's song "Sunshine Mind" here on WZBC. If you have any questions or comments, do give us a call here at 617-552-4686.
Lately my world is so shaded. The colors of love lost their gloss and were faded. Now out of the gray comes a beautiful day. You got a sunshine mind. Your eyes are warm and kind. Won't you stay? You got a sunshine mind. Your light can help me find my way. Here in the city of rain clouds, where everyone runs past the sun in insane crowds, I've seen your face and I found the right place. You got a sunshine mind. Your eyes are warm and kind. Won't you stay? You got a sunshine mind. Your light can help me find love. I've been searching for love, someone who can restore love, my faith that life holds more than dreams which can come true. I know that someone's you. You got a sunshine mind. Your eyes are warm and kind. Won't you stay? You got a sunshine mind. Your light can help me find love. What I've been searching for love, someone who can restore love, my faith that life holds more than dreams which can come true. I know that someone's you. You got a sunshine mind. Your eyes are warm and kind. Won't you stay? You got a sunshine mind. Your light can help me find the brighter day. You got a sunshine mind. Your eyes are warm and kind. Won't you stay? You got a sunshine mind. Your light can help me find. When the rains fall from the sky, you say the clouds are crying. If a gentle breeze blows by for you, the earth is sighing. Your empty world seems so unkind. Life's always hurting you, but life is just a state of mind. I'll change your point of view. I'll show you something new. Take a look at the world through love-colored glasses. You'll see blue where there once
Mikie Harris there, singing a song she wrote with Paul Levinson called Love-Colored Glasses. Now, Paul, did that song ever actually come out?
No, it didn't. And this Love Colored Glasses has always been one of my favorite songs.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites you wrote
thanks.
too.
And, I got the idea, I don't know when or how, Love Colored Glasses, and I wrote a couple of lines, and I called up Mikie Harris, because we had said we wanted to write some songs together. We wound up writing about 3 or 4 songs together, actually.
Oh, yeah?
But this was, the first one. And I told her the title. She said, great. So I went over to her house, later that day, and by the time I got over there, I had 98% of the lyric. I mean, that's, sometimes how these things go. When you get a lyric, and it feels right. One of the things I loved about that lyric is the line, I have, never, sunshine and punch line. I like those kinds of like audacious, which actually harkens back to Hung Up on Love, which is another song that Mikie and I wrote, where I have the gall to rhyme sunshine and lunchtime. So as I have something about lunchtime and punch time and sunshine in my brain. But Mikie had a great voice, didn't she? And she still does. I mean, she sounds so good on that demo. And, that slightly off-key falsetto there that you hear in the background is me singing harmony with Mikie. But we had a really, good time producing it. And it's really only a demo. And I'm not even sure who we were thinking about as a possible group, maybe the Association, I don't know. But that sounds so good to me. I think if it were released today as a single, it could be a big hit record. Take a look at the world through love-colored glasses.
Yeah. It's amazing that it never came out. I mean, it's just so definitive, like 1968,
Yeah. I think I saw somewhere that there may be a gospel song that someone wrote a year or two ago called Love-Colored Glasses.
Oh, really?
Because, you can't copyright a title, and that person probably didn't even know about this Love-Colored Glasses, but we had it first back in the 1960s.
All right, so up next we'll be featuring a couple of more studio demos that Paul Levinson wrote and recorded, but that were never actually released. So up next we'll be hearing a song Paul wrote with Boris Midney. Now, Boris Midney is best known for a slew of pretty awesome disco records he put out in the late 70s, early 80s. Now, how did you meet up with Boris Midney?
There was remember I mentioned Erwin Schuster. I mean, in those days, there were these guys, occasionally women, who worked for publishing companies, and they were really more than people who just buy songs. They would sometimes even put writers together. So there was a guy by the name of Bob Rhino, and I can't remember the name of the publishing company he worked for, but I had sold him some songs. And one day he said to me, there's a guy by the name of Boris Midney that you might want to get together with, because although I write words and music, I'm mostly, about words. And Boris writes music, so I said, sure. And even then, Boris was an incredible character. He had escaped from the Soviet Union.
Really?
Yeah, he was a saxophone player, a jazz man in the Soviet Union, but he did something that angered the Soviet officials, so he defected.
What did he do?
I think he told me he slept with Nikita Khrushchev's secretary. Well, who knows? I mean, he's a good-looking guy. It's certainly possible. And so he defected, right up there with Baryshnikov. And we sat down and wrote a bunch of songs together. We have another good song called Token Man that we wrote. But this was probably our best song, called Teacups and Tapestry. And this was one of the things where I just wrote the lyrics completely before I even heard a drop of music. Gave it to Boris. He called me up, said, come on down and hear it. And this is what I heard.
Oh, okay. So is he involved in the recording?
He produced it.
Okay.
And if you hear any saxophone in the recording, which I think there is, that's him playing saxophone.
Okay, yeah, there's definitely some horns in there.
That's right. But we have a studio singer, I don't know who it is, and we got a couple, some female studio singers, and they're doing background.
Okay, so here we go with Teacups and Tapestry, song written by Paul Levinson with Boris Midney, here on WZBC.
Society would frown. You live so high above me.
clouds above the crowds that teem and dream below you. Skyscrapers set against the pastel paper of the sky. I wish that I could see those colors glow too. Wonder what you see looking down at me. Wonder who I am. Wonder who I'll be. Skyscraper dressed up in the sparkling drapery of night. It's always bright outside for always new. Wonder what you see looking down at me. Wonder who I am. Wonder who I'll be. Skyscraper nestled in the quiet vapor of the clouds above the crowds that teem and dream below you.
All right, that was Linda Kaplan there singing a studio demo that she co-wrote with Paul Levinson called Skyscraper here on WZBC. Now, Paul, can you tell me a little bit about how you end up writing songs with Linda Kaplan?
Well, it's interesting, playing Teacups and Tapestry, Boris Midney back-to-back with Skyscraper, Linda Kaplan. Teacups and Tapestry is very sophisticated, almost has like a Soviet Turkish influence, with that jazz sound. And Skyscraper, incredibly simple and beautiful. Linda Kaplan actually was friends with some people that my then girlfriend, now wife, Tina, knew.
Oh, okay.
And so that's how I met her. And she was also a student at the City College of New York, where I think at that point maybe I was a senior. I hardly attended any classes at that point. I was outside singing harmony with the New Outlook. Linda and I started talking, and she told me she liked to write music, and she played me a couple of little songs that she wrote, and I thought they were great. And I gave her this lyric, Skyscraper, and I was delighted with what I heard. And the amazing thing about Linda, when she made that recording of Skyscraper, and we wrote the song about 6 months earlier, she was like 17 years old.
Wow.
A sweet little kid. I mean, I don't know, maybe 22 or something. But she later went on, and it's not surprising, she has unbelievable talent, to write the Toys R Us jingle. I'm a Toys R Us kid.
Yep, okay.
That was enormously successful. Then she started her own advertising publicity firm, now called Kaplan Thaler, and they are responsible for, the Clairol commercials, the Affleck quacking duck, commercials. So she has an enormous commercial sense and an enormous talent. We were out of touch for many, many years, and we got back in touch just a year or two ago, and we had dinner together, and she, of course, knows Tina, and we met her husband for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah, and so she's doing great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so
let me say one other thing about that song. I thought after September 11th that somehow that song became more meaningful, a sort of, ode to a skyscraper. It's not something that people usually write about, but they are really beautiful things in their own way.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to make there. All right, so up next we will be featuring a song that Paul Levinson helped produce by a group called Protozoa. Now, this single came out on Buddha Records. It's a song called Ring Around My Rosie. I first discovered it on sort of a bootleg compilation series that I can't really name on the air. But basically, Bubblegum Mother F series. Sort of not very legitimate compilations, but a good way to hear a bunch of bubblegum music. And I'm curious to hear how you hooked up with the production over at Buddha Records.
Well, what happened was, in a few minutes we'll be playing some cuts from Twice Upon a Rhyme, which is an album I wrote most of the songs with Ed Fox, and Ed Fox and I produced it. Peter Rosenthal is also on that album playing great guitar. We recorded most of that album at a place called A1 Recording Studios, the owner of which and the engineer was a guy by the name of Herb Abramson, who we didn't realize when we first walked into the studio. This was the Herb Abramson who helped found Atlantic Records in the 1950s, and he was originally partners with Ahmet Ertegun and Shuey Ertegun and all those people, Jerry Wexler. They eventually bought Herb out, and he decided to, run his own studio.
Okay. One
day when Ed and I were in, recording some songs from Twice Upon a Rhyme, Herb said, "Hey, there's a group from Pennsylvania that, is in here. They wanted to rent a couple of hours to record. They have some great bubblegum songs. Why don't the three of us produce it and then see if we can sell it to a record label?" Anyway, that group, I forget what their original name was, but it was a Pennsylvania group. The lead singer was David Fox, no relation to Ed Fox. And he wrote a bunch of nice songs, including Ring Around My Rosie. We recorded it. You can hear me wailing with falsetto near the end.
You're on the song. Cool.
I can't help it. I jump into every song. But we, as independent producers, we approached Buddha Records. They liked it. They released it. And they didn't like the name, whatever the name of the group was. So I came up with the name Protozoa because when I was in high school, I worked on the bio squad, the biology squad, and it was called the Protozoa Squad. So somehow the name Protozoa stuck in my head.
Amazing. All right, so here we go with Ring Around My Rosie, one of the great lost bubblegum songs from the late 60s, here on WZBC.
When I was just 4, I had a girl whose name was Rosie. Though I'm 4 no more, she's still the girl in my life. I like it that way, that's how it will stay. I love her so much, and that's why I say, I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Gonna love her all my life. Wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Gonna take her for my wife. I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. We'll be like one. When we're older, we'll put the ring around the Rosie, just like when we were young. We had so much fun. We always wanted to play house, and she'll be the one I'll pick for the rest of my life. And that's why I pray we'll marry someday. I love her so much, and that's why I say, I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Gonna love her all my life. I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Gonna take her for my wife. I can't wait to put the ring around my Rosie. Like one. When we're older, we'll play ring around the Rosie, just like when we were young. Ring around the Rosie, ring around the Rosie, ring around the Rosie. I like to play house for real, and then I'll propose, and someday who knows, just like when we were young.
All right, we're listening to Mary Goes Round by Trousers, a studio group with Bruce Scott singing and a song written by Paul Levinson and Ed Fox.
Well, so we already mentioned Ed Fox as one of the three producers, along with me and Herb Abramson, of Ring Around My Rosie. This song, Mary Goes Round, was produced just by Ed and me, and it was written by Ed and me. And I guess we were so inspired by Ring Around My Rosie that we decided to write our own bubblegum song, you know, a little heavier maybe than Ring Around My Rosie. A lot of interesting things about this record. First of all, there must have been about 4 or 5 different singers that we brought in to sing lead, and we weren't, including one guy who sounded like Frank Sinatra. He said, "Come on, baby." We realized that wouldn't work.
Do you have those on record?
Probably somewhere, but Bruce Scott did a great job. That wailing clarinet in the background is none other than our friend Boris Midney, who we brought in to do that. Pete Rosenthal, who we'll be hearing from soon again, he's playing guitar. I'm playing organ. Ed and I are doing harmony along with Bruce Scott. So we had a great time doing it. It was actually released first on our own record company, a sort of predecessor to Happy Sad Records called Feather Rock Records. Nothing much happened, and then we sold it to Wisdom Records, which was actually Jimmy Wisner's record company, the same Jimmy Wisner who produced Sunshine Mind with Donna Marie.
Okay.
And this was played in Buffalo, of all places, and every once in a while someone comes up to me and says they remember hearing the song. It was actually played on the Wonderama television show. It was like
really?
Yeah, and this was actually very good news for Ed and me, because we received a lot of broadcast royalties on this, so that always made us very happy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so you ended up recording pretty much like a solo album with your friends Ed Fox and Peter Rosenthal. Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Well, Ed and I really got, right around the time we were writing Mary Goes Round, we really began writing a lot of songs, and in my opinion, a lot of really good songs. I mean, I think my best lyrics in many ways. I mean, one of the songs, Looking for Sunsets in the Early Morning, I made my featured song on my MySpace, the page where actually I'm there talking about my science fiction novels. We'll talk more about that later. I also have a music page, so Looking for Sunsets in the Early Morning was one of those. Not Yet Ready to Say Goodbye, we included on the album. That actually was written by Linda Kaplan and me.
Oh, right.
And but we liked it so much we decided to put it on our album. And a little later you'll hear the Lama will be late this year. Ed was reading the newspaper one day. I mean, it sounds like something Paul McCartney would say, so I always like that. He was reading the newspaper one day, and there was a headline that said, "The Lama will be late this year." and what the headline was about was the Dalai Lama was supposed to make a visit someplace. He was going to be late. Okay. So Ed said, "Doesn't that sound like a good title for a song?" And I said, "Yeah." So, we whipped out this lyric. Ed
so
wrote
you
some
weren't
great
smoking
music
something, you were drinking coffee.
Right. People always say, "Oh my God, you guys must have been stoned out of your mind." We weren't. we were drinking coffee. That's it. I guess caffeine is a strong drug. There's some sugar in the coffee. Maybe that helped out too. And Pete, plays about 5 or 6 guitar parts on that. We'll hear it in a few minutes. I'm playing tabla on that in the background. So the total album is called Twice Upon a Rhyme, and it's become something of a cult classic.
I've seen it at eBay sell for like $100.
Yeah, Tina first noticed a few years ago, my wife, that there was a place out in California that was selling cult classics.
Okay.
And Twice Upon a Rhyme was listed there. And then, we began getting, email from people in Japan saying, "Do you have anything to do with this album?" We've probably sold about 50 copies of the album now to people all over the world, and probably 25 of those 50 to people in Japan. Wow. It's very gratifying. The album was recorded in mono because we couldn't afford to mix in stereo.
I was wondering about that.
I basically, in my typical way, making a virtue out of a vice, I basically scribbled in the liner notes, "We actually prefer mono to stereo." Actually, a little later, Phil Spector made a similar point, so, maybe I was on something.
All right, so we're going to hear a track entitled Not Yet Ready to Say Goodbye, which was written by Paul Levinson with Linda Kaplan and released on Twice Upon a Rhyme, an album Paul released on his own label, Happy Sad Records, in 1972. So here we go with Not Yet Ready to Say Goodbye here on WZBC.
Things been getting worse lately. I've been loving in reverse lately. Almost time to say that I will. Seems to me the road is all downhill. Don't you believe it, girl? So hey, we're not yet ready to say goodbye. Don't miss you. We'll get by. Goodbye, make it. We can't forsake it. We're not yet ready to say goodbye. Well, life's been down on us lately. Been causing quite a fuss lately. Breaking up wouldn't be the solution, but the treatment would be valuable. Hey, we're not yet ready to say goodbye, so I'm gonna miss you. We'll get by. Goodbye, make it. We can't forsake it. We're not yet ready to say goodbye. Can't say so long. It's been so long. Can't say that's all. 'Cause that's all wrong. That's all wrong. Hey, we're not yet ready to say goodbye. No, 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 I can't get by without you, baby. We can't forsake it. We're not yet ready to say goodbye. Goodbye. Say goodbye. Not yet ready to say
Hey, Paul, what's a llama? What's a llama? You know, what is it? Is it a camel? Yeah, what is it?
It's not a camel. He's a person. And he lived a long time ago in a distant country called Tibet.
Oh, he wasn't a camel.
No, he was a man with a long white beard, and every year he used to come down from the snowy hills. He used to bring the kids presents and food and flowers and everything. And everyone really had a good time. But one day he disappeared. He
Where'd
just
he go?
never
You
came
know?
again. Nobody knows where he came again. But years ago, I heard this old story from a man.
Man, who is this man?
Nobody knows what his name was. His name was Hawaiian Herb. Yes, Hawaiian Herb. Strange visitor from another planet. Who had a recording when they were taking up some old tapes in the studio. Somebody, put a tape on the machine and was able to work, strangely enough, the machine. And when they played the tape, they heard the story about the llama.
Yeah, but how did the story go?
Well, here, I'll play the tape for you now. Put it on now. Let me just plug it on. Here we go. Here's the tape.
Children, don't you know it's past bedtime? You've been waiting all day for the sun. Didn't come till now, it's eyes are red time. He's been holding down on everyone. People often go for such a long time. Never seen the likes of this before. He would always come in on time.
Oh boy. Yes, we're featuring Paul Levinson's music tonight, and we're listening to one of the last tracks on the album. Is it the last track?
It is the last track, yeah.
Called The Lama Will Be Late This Year. It's from an album entitled Twice Upon a Rhyme that Paul recorded with Ed Fox and Peter Rosenthal, and was released in 1972 on Paul's own label, Happy Sad Records.
I had a great time writing it. But actually, that record has a lot of interesting things. The little discussion at the beginning was just a classic example. We wanted to sort of create a context for our magical Lama, in contrast to the Dalai Lama, even though it was the story about the Dalai Lama in a newspaper that inspired us to write it. So I just, made up off the top of my head this crazy story. And that Hawaiian Herb, that's a reference to Herb Abramson.
Okay, yeah.
And I feel badly about this after all these years. Herb, forgive me. I took a little shot at the quality of his recording studio, because I say, all right, we're going to put the tape on. Here it is. So, but we had a lot of fun doing that. That's Ed singing lead, by the way. I was singing lead on Not Yet Ready to Say Goodbye. I sing lead on, I guess, 9 out of the 12 cuts. Okay, I can't do my own arithmetic. 10 out of the 13 cuts on Twice Upon a Rhyme. But that's Ed singing lead, a really good lead, and Pete playing guitar, both fuzz guitar and a couple of other, strange guitars in the background there. And as I said before, that song probably more than any other song from Twice Upon a Rhyme has gotten the most public acclaim. In fact, there's a guy in Sweden whose his name may be Patrick also, Patrick Lund or something, and he calls himself the Lama, and we've been in touch for a couple of years. He heard the song and asked me about it, so we've had a lot of fun with that song.
All right, so I got a question from a caller. They were wondering if you have 3 brains, because you're a media theorist, a writer, and a musician.
Well, I'm not even sure if I have one brain, let alone 3. But
and they were wondering, do you see a connection between the 3 different things?
Well, for me, actually, talking, singing, writing, and writing anything is pretty much all the same thing. It all does come from the same part of whatever brain I may have. What's changed is when I wrote these songs, that was pretty much the only thing I did. And then in the early 1970s, I began writing reviews of music for the Village Voice. My first article was actually defense of Paul McCartney against a ridiculous attack by Robert Christgau of the Village Voice. I think he's still at the Village Voice. I then began realizing there were other ways that I could say what I wanted to say. And actually, the Lama will be late this year, and that little, blurb at the beginning, if you think about it, is really sort of science fiction fantasy. And I've published now 5 science fiction novels. My current novel is The Plot to Save Socrates, which is a time travel story, and it's my most successful novel so far. And the Silk Code and the Consciousness Plague and the Pixel Eye are 3 novels that feature Dr. Phil D'Amato, my New York City forensic detective, who likes, strangely, the same kind of music I do. I wonder why. I wrote another novel, Borrowed Tides, about the first starship to Alpha Centauri, but since I wrote it, the ship only has enough fuel to get there. So I thought that would be an interesting setup. But I also, as your caller mentioned, do write nonfiction. And actually, sometimes when I'm working, I wrote a book called Digital McLuhan, and I was working on the book at the exact same time I was writing the Silk Code, and sometimes I couldn't tell which I was working on. And actually, my critics have made that point also about my serious writing, but I guess they don't understand it. But so really, to answer your caller's question, for me, it's really all the same, kind of stuff. It's all communication. I'm happiest when I'm doing something, when I'm talking, writing, singing, and I'm unhappiest when my mouth is shut and I can't write.
All right. Well, we're gonna have to shut it now because we're gonna hear another song you wrote with
Pete Rosenthal, Alpha Centauri. And Pete actually saw me on a Fox News show about science fiction. I was talking about my book, The Silk Code, in 2000, and he sent me an email, and I hadn't been in touch with him for 20 years, and I sent him a couple of lyrics, and this was one of them, called Alpha Centauri.
Okay, this is a more recent recording from 2000. We'll hear Peter Rosenthal doing Alpha Centauri, written with Paul Levinson here on WZBC. All right, there we just heard Peter Rosenthal singing Alpha Centauri, a song he wrote with Paul Levinson back in 2000. Okay, now we're going to feature Paul singing and playing live in the studio here, a song I think he just wrote recently.
Just a few minutes ago. What did I say, about a month ago? Actually, I wrote a new line to it last night. So it's a work in progress. It's called Lime Streets. Lime streets, prime seats, start the show, take it slow, plum parts, some hearts, got it made, unafraid. Days and dreams can both stay greenly. You can dodge the snow, fly in between lime streets. Time beats, pay no mind, lift the blind. Blue views, you choose, in or out, win or doubt. Nights and stars can still shine clean. You can slide the rain, inscribe the scene. Lime Street, time cheats, make your mark, shake the dark. Lime Street, prime seat. Lime Street, time beat.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul. Glad you could come down and join us tonight for the spotlight on your music.
I had a great time, Patrick, and it's great that you do shows like this.
We love it here. So thank you for tuning in to WZBC's Spotlight here on the music of Paul Levinson. If you have any questions or comments, do give us a call at 617-552-4686. And you have anything else you want to add, Paul?
Well, just hi to Tina, my wife. See you soon. And, just, hi to Stu Niddickman and Ira Margolis, who will be listening to this sooner or later, the original New Outlook group with me, and Ed Fox, who's out in California, Pete Rosenthal, and everyone else who are on the records that we heard.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Paul, for coming down.
My pleasure.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
And I'm back here with you in September 2010 through the time machine of recording. And I want to thank Patrick again for that fine interview. I really did enjoy it. And let me mention again that you can find in the show notes to this episode a complete playlist of all the songs that Patrick played in that interview. That's on lightonlightthrough.com. You'll also find there links to iTunes, Amazon, eMusic, where you can buy MP3s of this music right away if you'd like to hear some of it, as well as links to where you can hear some of the songs totally free. That's all on lightonlightthrough.com, lightonlightthrough.com. I'm Paul Levinson. I'll see you next time.